Escape to the metaverse, but act like you know. Yeah, you are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah, escape to the metaverse, better act like you know. Yeah, you are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah, escape to the metaverse, better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah, escape to the metaverse, better act like you know. You are now tuned into the Matthew Rizzle show. Yeah.
Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode of the Matthew and Rizzle Show, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Cool. Well, Bryan, welcome to the Matthew Rizzle Show.
Thanks for having me.
Like we were talking about, this is a long time coming. We've known one another for years at this point. We've interacted so many points in real life, in the metaverse. That we were looking back, we were like, how the hell do we not have Bryan Brinkman on Mars yet? So luckily, we're rectifying that aberration of history today. You have a lot going on. You have Nifty Gateway drop coming up amongst like a million other things that I'm sure you have on plate. But for like the one or two people that are unaware of who the number two influencer in the space is, I'm just wondering if you could kind of give us a potted history of yourself, like where you came from, how you found the crypto and NFT space to begin with, all the cool things that you were doing on The Tonight Show, SNL, all that good stuff. Tell us about where you came from and how you came up in the space.
Yeah. Well, I came from Omaha, Nebraska. That's where I grew up. Back then in high school, I was making cartoons on like Newgrounds and all these kind of early Flash sites. And that got me really into this, animation world. And web streaming and all this stuff. I went to college in Philadelphia at the University of the Arts for animation. And then after that, I came to New York. I worked in kind of all sorts of jobs I could find, because when you're an animator, you kind of take whatever you can get. I was kind of a jack of all trades. I worked in fashion advertising. I worked in commercials. I went out to LA and worked on some animated series. And then I would say I did that all over the place for quite a few years, and then eventually landed a job at the Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon, and Saturday Night Live. I did those jobs for, about 8 years. And then I found the NFT space about a little over 2 years ago, and that's when we kind of crossed paths.
Dude, I also feel the same as Matt, and like we've known each other forever. Like, how has this not happened? Dude, one thing I'm always like amazed by is like people who have like really recognizable styles, and whose like art you can recognize, sort of like right away. And I feel like that's very, very difficult to do. And you sort of have that, man. You sort of play off like a lot of the same color palettes, I guess. I'm not an artist, man, so it's like sort of hard for me to like identify like how this all happens. But is that just sort of like how has that occurred? And like, do you feel constrained to like sort of stay in that lane that is like super recognizable, or is there like a lot of like rogue Brinkman stuff out there? But just always really curious about that, man. Like, a lot of thinking about a lot of money lately and how like super iconic his style was. And, there's just really only a handful of people out there. I feel like you look at their art and you're like, obviously that is so-and-so's art. So, man, just sort of interested to hear your take on your approach to everything.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's something I was very conscious of early on, because coming from the pre-NFT world, I was making kind of pop culture artwork for these galleries in LA for they'd be like theme shows, like a Rick and Morty art show or a Monty Python art show. And when I did those shows, the curators of them would say, you're expected to kind of do what you're known for doing, do the same style over and over. That's what collectors want, and that's what curators want. And I always kind of hated that mentality. I thought it was very kind of creatively limiting. And so when I joined the NFT space, I kind of went at it with the approach of, I don't want to get stuck doing the same style, but if I use the same color scheme throughout all my work, then it allows me to kind of tie it all together in a way. And so that's why if you look at like my super rare pieces, one will be a traditional animation, one will be a 3D animation, one will be a 3D sculpture. And I kind of jump around and I try not to do the same technical styles over and over because I wanted to keep experimenting and having fun. But I then bring in those 4 or 5 colors as a way to kind of tie all of my collection together. And so I think when you talk about how all my stuff has that same look, that overarching palette is a part of my plan to kind of get around the constraints of being stuck in a corner artistically in this space.
Awesome, man.
And like, go ahead, dude.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to echo Rizzle. Like, your colors are iconic at this point. Like, I see them and it's immediately apparent that it's a work by Brinkman or collaboration by Brinkman. I love it. And like you said, it allows you to be the artist that you really are, which is someone who likes to experiment, who doesn't like to be constrained to one type of creation or creative process. And it's that reason that it's so fun to follow you. You never know what you're going to do next. You never know what the latest work will be. And like, for example, you fall into something exciting like the Flickr Fusion series, where it ends up becoming this like huge like canvas that you can run all these different experiments on that are all equally dank, but all distinctly different.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking back. Oh yeah, keep going.
I was going to say a lot of it came when I joined the space. A lot of the artwork I was seeing on Super Rare, like because when I first discovered the space, I kind of looked at Super Rare for a month or so before I applied and got into it. And a lot of the artwork I saw was kind of this glitchy, dystopian, dirty, grungy, muted colors, a lot of X copy and stuff, which is all very cool. But that's why I kind of immediately was like, well, I'm going to take my traditional animation background and really go in this like very colorful world, which I think the only person I saw kind of doing that at the time was probably Joy. But that was like, I was like, okay, well, I think I can bring a whole different angle to this area with all these colors and fun looping animations and stuff.
Yeah, totally. And it's really interesting too, how your work and the color palette that you work with feels like you. It's super upbeat, super positive. Like, you're the most positive person in this space, on top of being number 2 influencer. Like, the good vibes that you send out, I think are unparalleled. And just like meeting you everywhere, like, you are always boom on that amazing good vibe level. But I was thinking back to when we last reported way back when it was like the Scent Spotlight series or whatever in early 2020. And when you're just starting out, we're thinking, kind of like theorizing, like what could work, what may not work. Obviously, you had the colors to work with as that sort of signature style. But I'm curious, man, like over the 2 years since then, how has the space changed? Obviously, it's night and day, but like, what have you learned along the way? What now seems like, oh my God, how could you do anything like any other way? How are you thinking about collectors? How are you thinking about this whole space?
Oh yeah. Well, you mentioned like good vibes and that attitude. And I think a lot of it came from those early whip meetups and early Scent, communications, talking to artists in the space like Sarah Zucker or Coldy, the early, even though I wasn't a super OG in the space, when I joined, all the OGs were just good vibes. There was great people. And as it's evolved, I think the space has evolved in a lot of ways. One, on a technical level, what you can do with, Ethereum and NFTs has evolved so many ways, whether it's generative art or, back when I started, you could only do, GIF loops under 50 megabytes. And I enjoyed that limitation to a degree of like, okay, it was kind of a competition between people of like how big pixel wise and how long loop wise can you make a piece that fits into that constraint. And then, as the space has grown, it's interesting to see. I do think a lot of that good vibes stuff kind of shifted into this GM mentality that kind of spawned with like kind of the Clubhouse world that came like about a year later. And the collector vibe has certainly changed. I mean, back when we were doing that early stuff, I don't think anybody was buying NFTs with the idea that they would flip it for a ton of money, because there was no big flips at the time. I don't think it was kind of just a fun thing to collect and support and build together. And then, yeah, I would say like, post Beeple, a different wave of collectors came in that were much more speculative and more, trying to discover a blue chip, and not just discover blue chips, but create their own blue chips. You'd see these kind of bigger whale collectors come in and say, okay, I'm going to buy 10 of this artist and they're a blue chip, and I'm going to, make that my thing. And so it's definitely a different mentality. I don't think it's necessarily worse, but it's definitely, I think more people are looking at value than art, if that makes sense.
Does that change your approach at all, like as an artist, and like how the sort of wave of collectors and their mentalities has shifted? And I guess just sort of like being at the forefront of everything right now, it just seems like NFTs are like, do you just try and like tune that out and just keep doing the artistic thing, or do you have to like sort of adapt with the changing landscape?
I mean, I'm always hyper aware of my value to a degree, and like making sure that I'm not, over minting or undervaluing and hurting the people that have supported me prior as I go forward. I think I'm a little more reserved with what I mint now than I was 2 years ago. Back then it was like, okay, yeah, this is fun. I'm going to put this out. I made this in a week. It's really cool. I enjoy it. But now I feel like I have to put, now back then you could just put out a piece of art. Now when you do it, you have to roll out a whole like PR multi-day ad campaign, so it's like everything's a lot more thoughtful, probably in a good way. But it's much less loose, if that makes, I'm sure you guys feel the same way.
Yeah. I mean, back in the day, it was collecting solely because we loved the art, right? And we vibed with the artist, and we had to have it. Like that was the primary motivator for collecting and like being here, and like all the good vibes that the creators and artists and people that were around were emanating. It was just intoxicating. Like there's no better place. And like this is like pre-pandemic too. Like there's no better place in internet IRL I could think of than like what was happening in this very, very small neck of the woods, as it used to be, at least, right? It's interesting how the money changed things. I think it's validating in a lot of ways, and it's amazing to have been able to witness how many artists have just been able to become like full-time artists and do exactly what they were already doing, but now being in this financially self-sufficient position to just keep doing it, and then just doing it even bigger and not letting any sort of IRL or financial constraints limit the creative process. Starting to see sort of like what you're talking about, like people going crazy big, and the technical kind of constraints as well are expanding almost in equal measure, which is just, it's amazing, absolutely amazing, and humbling to be a part of. And it's that sort of creative process over and over that's really been the most interesting thing to me. And I feel super privileged at Nifty to be able to work with artists like yourself to kind of help produce some of these bigger and bigger collections. And I'm just wondering if you could like unpack a little bit of that more advanced or more involved kind of production process behind some of these bigger collections that you're putting out. And other people.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, and it's like, with like a super rare piece, for instance, you just have to make a single piece. It has to tell one story. But I think when it comes to a collection, which is what Nifty Gateway is great for, is you can kind of create a miniature art show, like a gallery show. And so then you go, okay, well, what am I going to find my style? And then, as you know, I'll go through weeks and weeks of just experimenting and throwing things against the wall and seeing what, technical things I can achieve that I think are really fun. And then once you get to that point, then you go, okay, how do I wrap this in a bigger storyline? How do I create, 5-6 pieces that all connect in a bigger picture and tell a broader story that you can't do necessarily with other marketplaces in that sense. So I think it's always an interesting process for me, but it's a lot of experimentation, and then it all kind of forms, and a lot of it was with the help of you. I mean, you kind of hold my hand along the way and say, okay, this one's cool, this one needs work, and sometimes you need that kind of outside perspective, because otherwise you get kind of stuck in your own head.
The thought of Matt holding your hand is deserves its own work of art. Its own
you should have seen us in Miami.
No, dude, I can only imagine, and I don't know, with the changing landscape, man, and what you're saying about how when people do drops now, they're, doing ad campaigns essentially leading up to them. Dude, I got a chance to meet you in NFT NYC, and I don't know, I feel like I've seen you go to a few other things, and that's the other thing that I've been really, I don't know what I expected. I guess taken aback by the amount of in real life things that are going on now that incorporate NFTs. And it just seems like so many people are on the circuit, going from one thing to the next and everything. How do you sort of balance that? And are you sort of on the circuit as well? And is that something that, I don't know. I guess a lot of questions in one. Just sort of interested to hear your take on that. Is that, sort of in real life scene has expanded as well?
Yeah, no, I think it must have been about a year ago that in real life stuff really started to kick off. Because coming out of that pandemic where we were all in the metaverse hanging out, being near New York is great because there's so many artists and collectors and project people in the city that there's just always events going on. I really enjoy that. In terms of the convention circuit, I think you're referring to, I can't do that nonstop. It seems to me like the way it's going to end up being is that every single week of the year is going to be a different city for NFT conventions. Yeah. And some people are just going to be constantly traveling from one to the next all the time. It's I was looking at this month, and it's there's NFTN, there's South by Southwest, then there's NFTN, then there's NFT LA, and then there's Miami Bitcoin Week. And it's just who can do all that? One week of any of those takes me out for a month, because it's, especially creatively, it puts you in a weird headspace where you're just inundated with people. And a lot of those conventions are people that are desperately trying to climb ladders, and it becomes pretty overwhelming. And so I'm going to do my best to limit myself to maybe 4 travel events a year or something.
Yeah. The events are definitely two-sided or double-bladed or whatever, right? It's really awesome to get to, when we're all in New York City, or when we travel to Miami, meeting up IRL, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. And to be able to bring all the folks that we've been hanging out and flying around with either naked or clothed avatars within the metaverse IRL, put actual faces and voices to usernames. It's just amazing. It really is. And there's a lot of amazing creative ideas and just the good vibes that come out of that. But it is its own treadmill, and it can be freaking physically exhausting if you're not cautious, and if you just over imbibe and all that stuff. And the circuit that is forming, it's not similar to these broader trends where all of a sudden everyone's doing a 10K PFP, you know what I mean? And people are just imitating and mimicking what everyone else is doing. And then the value, the actual physical meetings, breaking bread with one another and smaller groups, that original magic starts to get squeezed out just by the pure monotony and just the another one, and you start to lose sight of like special stuff. So
you're saying that because we saw DJ Khaled at one of these parties.
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm saying.
No, I totally agree. It's so much fun. NFT NYC, I lost my voice by the end of it. I just talked to so many people. It was so fun. I think I still might have had it kind of when I saw you, Rizzle, but it was still kind of shaky by that point. But yeah, it's a pace. You have to pace yourself to a large degree, and I think it also puts especially for artists like Art Basel. I had a great time. It was wonderful, but myself and everyone else was in this weird headspace where it's like all the NFT artists were trying to like break into the traditional space, and all the traditional artists were trying to break into the NFT space, and like everyone was having these identity crises, and it was just like we're all having fun here. Like we don't have to all appeal to everybody that exists. I think those circuits are built more for people that are running these kind of like projects. You know, they're not built for artists. They're built for people that are running DeFi and 10K projects, and that way they can throw these little parties at all these things. So I think I'm just going to have to be diligent about going to ones that are more artist focused versus like NFT focused, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I feel like I've learned, like each one of these things that I go to, I feel like I've learned more and more about like where to best like focus my time and energy to, maximize these things, because I just agree with everything you're saying. You just can't keep up. I'm also like close enough to New York City that it's nice. Like I'll probably make those, the big ones up there and that kind of thing. It's nice to be close to some of the big ones that are going on. Dude, so you essentially had a career change. I guess you sort of turned your hobby into a, full-time career, not too long ago. Is this like, I don't want to say like end game, because I would assume like as an artist, you're always sort of like exploring and like creating and everything. But like, are you like pretty cool just like doing your art thing like full time now and just like in a rhythm, or do you have like a larger, I don't know, goal or thing that you were working towards, or was this the larger goal or thing that you were working towards, or like, where's Bryan Brinkman, what's he doing 5 years down the line or whatever, or are you just sort of like rolling with it?
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, about a year ago, I left my full-time job at Fallon to do NFTs. I still help out SNL occasionally. I'm still friendly with all those things. Yeah, my big plan, I don't have an overarching long-term goal other than continue to experiment and have fun and try new things. What I've found is as I do all these art things, I get pulled into things that are interesting to me, like being advisor on projects that are kind of bigger than me. And so I see those as like kind of things that will pop up and take little chunks of my time and energy, but I think those will always continue to pop up and be a side project for me. So that, because I was talking to my dad yesterday actually, and he was like, "Yeah, I could retire." And then I was like, "What would you do?" And he's like, "Well, I just play music all the time because that's all I really want to do is make music and record it and have fun." And I was like, "Okay, yeah." And that's kind of like where I'm at now, where it's like I've hit this like retirement thing where I can just make art as much as I want, but at a certain point you're going to go, okay, well, what else can I do? And it's like, right now I'm helping build something called ChangeDAO, which is an NFT platform for minting NFTs to raise money for charities and causes. I'm an advisor on NFTs WTF, which is like a Vice News for NFTs, because I think media is terrible at talking about NFTs. And so I'll just keep getting pulled into these little side things that interest me. And I think that's what's kind of great about this space, is that I don't have to like have a set career path. I can just look at the things that I think are interesting, whether it's being an advisor on a project or just a new NFT platform that I think is interesting and might spark a creative idea. I'm probably going to do a whole lot of different, collaborations with projects, whether it's, games or wearables or whatever. I think there's no there's no set plan, and that I think that's by design, because I have such like an ADHD brain that I want to do like 10 things at once anyways.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to do whatever you want, right? People are always like, well, what are you going to do? And they're like, you're just going to go play golf, or you're just going to make art. And like, people are so multivariate, and like, there's all these interests in just being able to pursue whatever it is that you want to do. Like, that's the dream.
It's true,
right? Not to do any particular thing, but to be able to do whatever you want to do. And it's just, it's so cool to see you do that and sort of like become a guiding light for other people. Not just you though, like there's a whole gang of people who are doing exactly it is, whatever they want, whenever they want. And like that light that the individuals have has come together to form this like massive signal for people to come into this space. And it's crazy. You can see, you can hear, you can feel just like the amount of people that are heading to the space because of that potential. A lot of people are getting blinded and sort of like zapping themselves like mosquitoes to a big mosquito zapper in summer just because they're only focused on the money. But if you come to the light and you're cool hanging out around it and you don't like head into the sun, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, I think you were talking about, before I left my job a few months before, Gavin Shapiro, who's another Nifty Gateway artist, wonderful guy, he did it. And so he was a prototype for me to say, okay, this is a thing, this is possible. And so I think, yeah, everyone that sees someone else do it and find success doing it is a guiding light in that sense. So I'm sure people saw me do it and thought it was, time, but I don't recommend everybody quit their jobs right away. make sure you're in a good place before you go quit your jobs. But it certainly has. I'm glad I did it for many reasons. And so far it's been phenomenal. I mean, I wouldn't have the time to fly to Miami and do all these cool things otherwise.
A little bit earlier, you were talking about like down in Miami in particular, seeing how like the traditional art world was kind of like thinking about how they can come into the NFT space. Artists that are in the NFT space are kind of like are looking for ways to like validate themselves in the eyes of the traditional art world. From like an artist's lens, like I'm just curious, like where the hell is the art space now? Where is it going? Like what is going on?
Yeah, well, I think it's somewhere in between. I was telling someone the other day, it's like, well, some artists come to me and they're like, oh, should I do this like Sotheby's drop? And it's like, well, it'll probably sell for less, but it's not about the money there. It's about the resume. And for me, it's like my grandma doesn't know what Nifty Gateway is, but she knows what Sotheby's is. And so if I want to impress my grandma, I'll do that one time, So you have to kind of like, do things just to impress different people, I suppose. I think, I don't know, what was the question exactly?
So where's the art world now? Like, where's it going?
Yeah, I think it's merging. We see it in some of these traditional shows that are like a mixture of Hearst and Basquiat and Thank You X and Drift shoots. They can all exist in the same room. I think eventually the idea of NFT art will just become digital art. And I think that it's an unnecessary barrier right now, and especially as minting contracts get better and these collectors get more okay with not fully owning, letting an IPFS hold their image. I think that's been the hardest part for like museums to wrap their heads around, is because they're like, well, we want to be a preservation center for art, but we don't actually have control over the art because it lives on an IPFS server outside of our grasp. I think that when I've talked to some museums in the past, that's a thing that they just can't quite get over, but I think they will get over it eventually once they start to have more trust in those image hosting sites. It's like a Manifold or whatever. So yeah, I think I think we're going to start to see a real blend. I mean, we're going to see more and more traditional artists enter the space. And as that happens, then it just becomes another medium for anybody to paint on to a degree.
Do you run into, like, are there certain limitations? Like, you're talking about being constrained by, the size of the file that you were able to upload before. And I'm also someone who, like, sort of enjoys being constrained by, like, certain limitations. I feel like it's kind of like a fun challenge. Are there, like, certain roadblocks that you currently run into, or certain, like, things that would allow you to, do something that you're not able to do now? Or has things, like, sort of freed up enough that you've got a lot of creative liberty with the tools that you have?
Yeah, I would say my biggest limitation nowadays is time. Being able to do all the things I want to do effectively is one of the hardest parts. So I think in terms of technical wise, the space is evolving so quickly. I think there's still technical limitations to on-chain art, which I think is important. But I think if you look at like Josie's Cyber Brokers this week, like that to me changed what I expect from a PFP project in terms of a technical achievement. And so like now the bar is raised again. And so I think same with art blocks. When I did Nimbuds, like what we did was very early and kind of rudimentary. And then 6 months later, people were doing fully 3D video games on the same, the same code base. So it's just, I think everything is going to keep evolving past whatever you think is possible. And then, I think the technical limitations right now are, if you look at like video games in the space or metaverses, they all kind of look like 4-generation old video game systems. I think we're still a long ways from fully achieving, a graphic standard in the space that lives up to what we see on current video game systems.
I want to dig more into that metaverse. A lot of these virtual spaces that you've been building in, that other people have been excited about buying and selling this virtual land. It's definitely at a point that is underwhelming for many. It's very, 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 very early days. I'm curious, like, based on, first of all, like, tell people, like, where have you kind of built, where have you explored when it comes to like the quote unquote metaverse, or like digital spaces where you can like live, work, and play? Mm-hmm. And then where do you want to see it? Like, you personally, where do you want to see it evolve into?
Yeah, well, I'd say, about a little under 2 years ago, I started in crypto voxels. I think I saw a lot of money's builds and was kind of floored by what you could do in what I thought was a simple, like, Minecraft looking thing. And then I realized you could kind of import and fully customize and make something really unique. And at that point, I think I did a project with Pranksy where I got to build a candy shop, and I spent this was beginning of pandemic. So I had a lot of free time, and I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to learn crypto voxels. And I just kind of built that candy shop as a way to kind of learn it for about 3 months, maybe, or 2 months. But then from that point on, I got hooked, and I kept buying more plots and building little pop-ups. And that was kind of the starting point for me. Then from there, I looked into Decentraland, which I always found to be a little harder to build in, but I liked the overall style, and I eventually have made wearables for it. But I don't own a plot of land in it, but I've built sculptures for it. I still think it's a really cool platform. And then I'm trying to think of, like, I've played around in Somnium Space. I've gone to the Mocha Museum. Sandbox, I tried learning the beta. I thought it was too confusing because I didn't want to build a video game, essentially. And then recently I've gotten more into kind of, as opposed to these big world metaverses, I've gotten really into these singular room metaverses, which is like on cyber or spatial, where you can kind of just decorate your room, which is kind of where I always kind of saw the metaverse becoming as just an augmented reality way for you to decorate your personal space to bring other people into. And I think all of them are really great tools for sharing art. which I think is one of the core aspects of the space, which is just the show and tell of like, look what I got. What do you think? And what did you get? And so that's what I love about crypto voxels. You can just walk down the street and just see people's collections, learn, discover. And so I think that idea translates to all of them. It's just a matter of the ease and of building and the cost entry for people to get in. Like, I don't think anybody's going to go buy a Decentraland plot right now because they're extremely expensive and it's hard to build in, but it's a really cool land. And so, but like most people are going to go use a free on Cyber and make a little gallery, get a feel for that, show their art. And then if they start to want more, then they'll go buy a bigger room and stuff like that. And so I think, in terms of appealing to the masses, I think we're going to see a lot more of these kind of boutique mini galleries, and then the crypto voxels will kind of appeal to people that want more of a multiplayer experience around them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, totally. And like for a while, I've always tried to think of like the bigger open virtual worlds as like as cities. So like you would have Decentraland as like Dubai or somewhere like super shiny, but like really expensive and like, I don't know, sort of like devoid of like really compelling culture for the most part. A lot of like nice stuff though.
It's like those islands in Dubai that are like not built on.
Yeah.
They're multi-million-dollar empty islands.
Yeah. And then you have like Somnium Space, which is like Montana. It's like gorgeous, but there's like no one there. Like it's or whatever. Sandbox, I guess, wants to be like more like Disney World or Disneyland meets like, I don't know, Vegas or something like that. But like on Cyber, Monaverse, Rare Rooms, like these room-based virtual spaces, I haven't really thought of in depth, but it's almost like you enter like an apartment building and you're just going into the individual apartments that people kind of set up their galleries and things like that. And like you're saying, it's sort of like showing people that, hey, these virtual spaces can be like 3D websites that you can bring people to and show them around. There's like this very, very, like this hints of the group experience that's possible.
Yes.
And if that's appealing enough, or if there's like a couple other things that can be added to that very basic experience, feels like you can start to have this like trickle down effect into these larger worlds, which are largely empty now, unless you have like an event like the Whip that brings a bunch of people together in the same virtual space. And then you start to see like more opportunities. But after the event, it's just like ghost town, except for like a random naked avatar that falls into these worlds. It's definitely going to be interesting where all of that begins to head. But still excited to be here super early building and like having you come on the Whip tomorrow to talk about your drop on Nifty Gateway, which, by the way, I mean, do you want to sort of unpack for people what you've created in your new collection called Tragic Pop?
Yeah. So Tragic Pop, let's see, how do I talk about this? It's a collection of 5 plus a bonus pieces that revolve around the idea of creativity. It's a bit of a self-portrait to a degree, and how, you know, the struggles of creativity, the ups and the downs, the fighting through it, and what builds into an idea. And so the pieces to me kind of reflect on 5 core ideas of creativity, which is kind of your mind, your ears listening for critiques, your hands, which are, you know, your tools you use, pencils, mice, whatever you decide to use to create, whether maybe code, and then your eyes, and there's one other one, right? And then the heart, which is, you know, which is the most important part. And so each of these are like tell many stories about those ideas, whether it's, you know, the eyes filled with cloudiness and, you know, reaching for something, the hands filled with the tools you use. The ear is filled with Discord notifications that drown out your ability to create with messages. They each tell like mini stories, and then they all kind of come together to be this bigger collection. And for people that actually collect all of them, there'll be this kind of amalgamation self-portrait, I suppose, of me made out of all these pieces. It's as you know, it was a tough one to kind of bring together, but I'm feeling really good about where it came to. It's always fun because with my Nifty drops, I tend to kind of flip my style, talking about what we were talking about earlier, where I try to keep changing it. And so this one, I came up with a new style, and it's like, okay, now how do we tell a story with that? And so it's been fun to kind of like the pieces reflect the process of making this drop to a large degree, which I think will be more and more fun to look back on over time, because they're a diary entry in my journey.
Yeah. And we talked about it over the course of this. And you mentioned it's sort of like a deconstructed self-portraiture, if you will. All the elements of the artist, of you, of any artist in these pop-obsessed times. It tells a story that I think has always been part of your greater body of work, where it's easy to get lost in the pop colors, the beautiful colors. But a lot of what you've created has undercurrents of something a bit darker, a bit more tragic, like work that you just released on Super Rare, for example, which is like this funny little hand kind of like scrolling on a smartphone. Is it doom scrolling? Like, is that the hand's never stopping? It's just an infinite loop of scrolling. Like, it looks cool. That's what we're doing. And it's also what we're doing. And bringing the tragic side of the pop to the forefront so clearly in this collection is something that hopefully other people catch, and hopefully other people see, and hopefully other people start to think about in relation to your greater body of work. So, yeah,
well, I think I told you about it early on, which is my love of pop music that's about tragedy. Songs that are really catchy and fun, but they're about like a car accident or so, there's something lovely about that juxtaposition. About a year ago, I did the Genesis Async music piece, which is called Betty's Notebook, which at first glance is this really pretty drawing of a woman kind of singing lines of an airplane. And then once you listen to the music, you realize it's about a woman who's listening to Amelia Earhart's distress calls and slowly dying. And so I love that kind of like, you bring people in with this lovely imagery, and then once you get them to sit down and look at it, then they have to absorb this very serious, sad moment. And I think that kind of candy coating to tragedy is something that, like you said, it's something that's kind of throughout a lot of my work.
When you're like coming up with these concepts, Betty's Notebook was such an incredible project. I assume like in that case, it's like one of these things that you were saying before is like, you have networked within the space. There's like a cool project that you get to be a part of. And that, those things sort of like fall into your lap sometimes if you hang out around here long enough. But in terms of like sort of figuring out your angle on this Nifty Gateway drop, for example, as compared to like the other stuff that you do, like, do you look to other artists for inspiration, or like how do you sort of turn on the creative lights, or like get like the juices flowing when you're trying to sort of switch up the flow, or what's the process like?
That's a good question. So I mean, a lot of this drop, for instance, pulls on previous stuff I've done. I feel like a lot of my work has callbacks and references to earlier work, whether it's the eyeball has kind of this Nimbud cloud that ties into my my first cloudy collection drop, or like the using kind of particles to create forms, which was something that was kind of built on in my last Nifty Gateway drop, and the subliminal drop. And so I think I tend to like go back and look at my work, and then I go, okay, what did I like about any of these things, and how can I expand on that? Because a lot of times with like my Super Rare work, that was one-offs, and they were one-off experiments, and sometimes I feel like I don't fully get everything I wanted out of that path I was taking. And so sometimes I can go back and go, okay, well, this piece I did 6 months ago, I really enjoyed doing that, but I didn't fully explore what I could do there. And so I think a lot of what you see here is pulling from a lot of different things, whether it's the thumbs up I did on Super Rare like 2 years ago, or the run.exe drop I did like 6 months ago, where it was kind of a guy running filled with shapes. And so I think there's a lot of variation, but with this one, I kind of expanded into a different, a lot of those early pieces were done two-dimensionally using particles. This one, I took it into a three-dimensional form, and I took those particles and I put them into 3D shapes. And so that allowed me to have more depth, more shadows, and a lot more like kind of control over the shape of these, because these are, even though they're all flat pieces of art, they're all three-dimensional shapes. So technically I can take these and export them and put them into a metaverse, and people could walk around them and stuff like that. And so I think a lot of it is technically pushing myself forward. And then also referencing old stuff as well, so that it all, like you were saying at the beginning of this, how does it all fit together in a bigger picture? But I'm certainly influenced by everyone in the space, because I'm just absorbing art 24/7, which is great.
Dude, I'd love to see these like as 3D like sculptures or installations in virtual worlds. Like I didn't know that was actually possible, but we got to make that happen, dude.
Yeah. Oh, I've tried it. I mean, they are flat. So if you look at it from one angle, it's like there's an artist, spacing on his name right now, but he encases people in objects in glass layers. Mm-hmm. And it kind of looks like that, where if you look at it from the side, it looks like a bunch of like single lines essentially. But mm-hmm. I think it's really cool. Yeah. It's something I would love to figure out how to do. I don't know if it would import it into Decentraland, but I think I could get it to import it into like on Cyber. Decentraland has a lot of restrictions on polygons and stuff like that, and a lot of these have like thousands of planes. So but I'll have to send you one to check out. I think it would be pretty cool. I think the arm would be pretty cool. I think the head would be pretty cool.
No, totally. And as we're getting towards the ends of our chat, one of the things we always love to do a little shakedown, and you're such a prolific collector in the space too. It's one of the things that was always interesting to me, and I think a lot of other people, artists, also not just having their work collected, but collecting others. Mm-hmm. So if we were to kind of like pry into your digital wallet, like what have you been scooping up as of lately? Kind of curious.
Well, that's a good question. Actually, today I bought a piece by an artist named grvsy.eth, Gurzy, which is it kind of looks like my drop right now. Things I've been collecting. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, Josie's Cyber Brokers. I think those are incredible. The fact that you can right click and save them, open them up in Illustrator, and then like undress them and see all the different layers and stuff. It's so cool. Like it blows my mind. Yeah, I think I'm always trying to collect like art blocks and generative art. I don't know. Let's see. What have I been getting recently? I love Eric Paz on. He's been a fairly new super rare artist, but I've followed him for many years on Instagram, and I love his work. It's very kind of geometrical. But yeah, I don't know. As with everybody in the space, you kind of fall into this degen route where you end up buying all sorts of like silly things that are pretty worthless. But no, I try to find a good mix of like one of ones, small editions of artists, and then, you know, large collection PFPs to be a part of fun communities. It's kind of funny. I was looking through Sia announced that she's been secretly collecting in the space for a long time, and you can dig through her wallet and see what she has. And she has some cool stuff. but she has a whole lot of junk PFPs. It's like, oh my God. And so it's like, it doesn't matter if you have one of the, premier singers in the music industry. She's still going to buy a bunch of junk PFPs, which is, humanizing to a large degree.
Yeah. 100%.
But yeah, I don't know. What have you guys been collecting?
Dude, for me, basically every collection that I produce on Nifty Gateway is designed for me to be able to collect something. That's basically how it's been. Some of the more recent pieces that I collected, again, just Pop Wonder released Pop Wonderland, which they were for his first ERC 721 tokens outside of like his amazing body of work on OpenSea, which they're all cool. And I love how he's like segmented the one of ones versus like larger limited edition sets, and then his like collaborative work. But most of that has all been like 1155s. But when he released Pop Wonderland, it's like huge 3x3 like world that he divided into individual, like 9 individual pieces that are all individual standalone works of his with his signature, like vintage future art style of like almost comic book-esque. Mm-hmm. And I just scooped a triptych from the center of that, partly because it's tied with the physical, and like you can never have too much art. My Metaverse art collection is amazing, but I need to definitely fill up my physical life with some beautiful art. So that's probably like the thing I've been most happy to collect as of late. But yeah, every drop I try to collect at least.
I love his work. I wish I would have. Yesterday I missed Elise Swope's drop, and I have 2 of her pieces on Nifty, and that was a collector's drop, and I was like, oh, man. Sometimes you're primed to like have a really good chance at winning some of these things, and you just go to dinner and you miss it. It's hard to keep track of it all.
Dude, trust me. Matt and I were just talking about some of the epic misses, which I have no shortage of. Dude, I've been collecting like a lot of people who I know within the space who are just doing new projects and stuff. I minted a couple of Crypto Bauhaus's things on Art Blocks a few days ago, and they the physical copies like just showed up yesterday, which is awesome that those came with that. A bunch of Fly Frogs, man. I work with the Fly Frogs, and I love that crew. So I'm like slowly accumulating frogs. I minted like a couple hot dogs yesterday, which is
those are fun. Yeah, I haven't gotten any, but I like the art.
Well, so, but this is how it happens, right? Like Tigbo is like somehow involved with that project, and he's like been a huge supporter of ours for like ever. And I feel like that's how I fall into like all these projects. Is basically like, people who have been in the community or around, or like supporters of stuff that I've been doing, and now they're doing cool stuff. And scooped up a Mighty Moose on Super Rare the other day, and I go digging around on Tezos periodically. I love doing that. So I don't know, man. Probably about the same as Sia. Like I haven't checked out her wallet, but like some cool art and a lot of junk. But I've become much more careful about only buying junk that I really like the way it looks. So that way, obviously if I'm stuck scrolling through it, I have, at least good memories of getting rugged or whatever.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I love just like going on Tezos. If you guys are trying to buy some good stuff on Tezos, I highly recommend this guy named Master Tingus. I don't know.
Yes, dude. You commented on my post of theirs the other day.
Yeah.
So great.
I think it's the best. I think if you like Pop Wonder is great. And this is like to me, like it's on a Pop Wonder level of just like pure joy of like funny, random, obscure weirdness.
Weird.
But I also love Crypto Bauhaus. I have a few prints of his. I love his work. It's so diverse for a generative artist to have like so many distinctly different good styles.
Agree.
I love it. And before we go, just want to make sure we let people know all the things that they need to be apprised of. Number one, you're going to be on the Whip tomorrow, 12 p.m. Pacific, Thursday, March 10th. Stoked for that. March 11th, 3/11, Nebraska Reverence. You have the Gateway drop, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. these 5 pieces. Primary one collector piece, 4 open to everyone else. Amazing collection. What else do you have coming up in the near future that you want people to follow?
I guess next week I won't be at South by Southwest, but if anybody listening is, on the 17th, Change Now, the place I'm an advisor and helping build, is doing a talk with Tyler Hobbs. I recommend going to that.
Wow.
2 weeks from now, on the 24th, I'll be speaking at NFT in America with 14 incredible other artists, and it's curated by Colburn, Han, and Nicole from Vertical Crypto Art. Nice. So I'll be out in LA for that, and then I think I'm just going to hang out in LA an extra week for NFT LA. So if anybody listening is going to be at either of those, hopefully we can hang out. And so that kind of fills out my month. And I think I might have, there might be a drop towards the end of the month for something fun, but I don't know if I can officially say yet.
Nice.
Staying busy, dude. Jesus Christ.
Seriously.
Dude, I love it though. I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show, chatting with us, for being just an amazing human being and an amazing artist too. It's a pleasure. It really, really is. Super stoked for the drop in Nifty Gateway, but for everything else that you're doing, for sure, man. So yeah, just thank you and keep creating and doing exactly what you've been doing, man.
Thanks for having me. You're both two amazing humans as well. I'm proud to be friends with you both.
Oh, thank you.
And I'll see you tomorrow at the Whip.
Right on.
Boom.
Amazing.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this week's episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proof of Beauty. Proof of Beauty is an experimental digital experience studio. The blockchain is their canvas and the tokens are their brush. You can learn more about Proof of Beauty by checking out pob.studio. You can follow them on Twitter as well at PRRF Beauty. That's PRRF Beauty on Twitter, and pob.studio on their homepage to learn more about their projects like Hash, London, and Publico. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.